Before the storm, a sense of normalcy often prevails. A deceptive calm settles over the landscape, masking the turbulence that lies just beneath the surface. Mark Jensen lived a quiet, predictable life, a life meticulously crafted and carefully maintained. He was a man of routine, finding comfort in the familiar patterns of his days. He was a senior data analyst at Omnicorp, a position he'd held for years, steadily climbing the corporate ladder. Omnicorp was a global tech giant, a behemoth in its industry, and Mark was a devoted family man, his priorities firmly rooted in the well-being of his wife and children. His world revolved around numbers, a language he understood implicitly, a world of logic and precision. Spreadsheets were his canvas, and the steady rhythm of suburban life was the soundtrack to his days. To his neighbors, he was just another face, a friendly, unassuming presence in their shared community. Mowing the lawn on Saturdays, coaching his daughter's football team with enthusiasm and a supportive spirit, Mark found satisfaction in solving complex data puzzles, unraveling intricate patterns hidden within the numbers. He truly believed in Omnicorp's mission, its stated goals and its impact on the world. He never sought the spotlight, preferring to let his work speak for itself. Content to work in the background, he was a vital cog in the machine, a silent contributor to Omnicorp's success. Evenings were spent with family, sharing meals and laughter around the dinner table. Far from the pressures of the corporate world, he found solace and joy in the simple moments of family life. He trusted his employer completely, believing in their integrity and their commitment to ethical practices. Never suspecting any shadows behind Omnicorp's polished image, he accepted the company's narrative without question. But even the most stable lives, the most carefully constructed realities, can be upended by a single unforeseen event, a twist of fate that shatters the illusion of control. For Mark, that disruption was coming, brewing beneath the surface of his ordinary existence. Beneath his calm routine, the predictable rhythm of his days, unseen forces were shifting, alliances were forming, and secrets were being guarded. The life he'd built, the foundation he'd so carefully laid, was about to be shaken, tested in ways he could never have imagined. Not by nature's fury, but by a string of numbers on a screen, a silent language that held the power to unravel everything. The unassuming man, the quiet data analyst, was about to face a monumental choice, a decision that would redefine his life and challenge everything he believed in. The discovery began as a whisper, a faint signal barely audible amidst the constant hum of the digital world. It was the kind of anomaly that most would overlook, a blip easily dismissed as a system error or a minor data corruption, a tiny anomaly in a sea of data. A single misplaced decimal point, a transposed number, something so insignificant it seemed almost accidental. Mark was running a routine audit on a new subsidiary, a seemingly unremarkable task that had landed on his desk. He was known for his meticulous nature, his unwavering attention to detail. Project Nightingale. The numbers didn't align. Something was off, a subtle discordance that pricked at his intuition. He reran the query. He double-checked his formulas, ensuring there were no errors on his end. The anomaly persisted. It stubbornly refused to disappear, a digital ghost in the machine. Curiosity took hold. It was a professional itch he couldn't ignore, a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. He dug deeper, venturing beyond the surface-level reports and into the underlying data structures, pulling raw data logs, sifting through endless lines of code and financial transactions, and working late into the night, fueled by coffee and a growing sense of unease. The deeper he went, the more uneasy he felt. The data seemed to be actively resisting his scrutiny, obfuscated by layers of complexity. Finally, he decrypted a set of internal codes, far more encrypted than standard, a clear indication that something was being deliberately concealed. There it was, a hidden ledger meticulously concealed beneath layers of digital security. Project Nightingale was a shell, a digital mirage, a carefully constructed illusion designed to deceive, funneling phantom revenue into Omnicorp's reports, artificially inflating their profits and misleading investors. The scam was vast, intricate, and worth billions, a complex web of deceit that reached the highest levels of the corporation. Mark felt a cold dread wash over him, a chilling realization of the magnitude of what he had uncovered. This was deliberate, calculated fraud, a systematic scheme to defraud investors and enrich those at the top. The company he'd trusted was built on lies, its success predicated on a foundation of deception and manipulation. The numbers he'd always believed in had been weaponized to deceive, twisted and manipulated to create a false reality. He saw the faces of colleagues and investors, all betrayed, unknowingly complicit in a grand illusion. The quiet order of his world was shattered, replaced by a chaotic landscape of moral ambiguity and corporate corruption. He was the only one who knew, the sole witness to a crime of immense proportions. The weight of the secret pressed down on him, a crushing burden of responsibility and fear. Mark realized he stood at a crossroads, a pivotal moment that would define his future. What he did next would change everything, not just for him, but for everyone connected to Omnicorp. The knowledge was a heavy burden. Mark wrestled with what to do. Risk everything or stay silent and be complicit? He thought of his children and the example he'd set. He decided to report his findings internally, trusting the company's code of conduct. He approached his supervisor with a carefully worded report. Instead of concern, he was met with polite dismissal and told to drop the matter. Undeterred, Mark used the anonymous ethics hotline, submitting detailed evidence. He waited for a response, but only silence followed. The hotline was a trap, not a channel for truth. The risk became real. He was now a threat to a billion-dollar conspiracy. Mark began making secure copies of the data, hiding them at home. He was defying the unwritten rules of corporate loyalty. Alone, he whispered the truth in a soundproof room. The walls were closing in. Omnicorp's response to Mark's actions was not just swift, it was brutal and calculated. They moved with a precision that only a corporation with vast resources could muster. It was a display of power meant to send a clear message. The first sign came swiftly. Mark's access card, once a key to his professional life, was abruptly deactivated. He was immediately escorted from his workspace, not to a meeting room, but to a sterile, windowless conference room, a place designed to feel isolating. Inside, a panel of stern-faced executives and a sharp-suited lawyer confronted him. The accusations weren't about the fraud he had exposed, but rather about unauthorized access to company files. They twisted his actions, framing him as the perpetrator, not the whistleblower. The company initiated a carefully orchestrated smear campaign. Mark was no longer seen as a concerned employee, but as a rogue agent, a disgruntled element within the company. The truth of his discovery was buried under layers of manufactured doubt. He was placed on administrative leave, a limbo designed to isolate him. His access to the company network was revoked, cutting him off from colleagues and the information he needed. His desk sat empty, a stark symbol of his sudden removal. Whispers and rumors began to circulate like wildfire. He was portrayed as unstable, a liar, and a consistently poor performer, a narrative carefully crafted to discredit him in the eyes of his peers. Even friends began to distance themselves, fearing association with the troublemaker. Lunch tables became empty when he approached, and hallways were navigated with averted eyes. Mark found himself a pariah in his own world, ostracized and alone within the very walls where he had once belonged. The pressure mounted as surveillance intensified. Unmarked black cars began appearing near his home, their presence a constant, unsettling reminder. Strange phone calls, late at night, filled with static and veiled threats, became a regular occurrence. Ominous letters arrived, filled with veiled threats designed to intimidate and silence him. The message was crystal clear. Omnicorp possessed the power and the will to crush any opposition, to silence anyone who dared to challenge their authority. The pressure was immense. Financial strain mounted as bills piled up, and the psychological stress took a heavy toll. Most of all, there was the gnawing fear for his family's safety. His wife was terrified, constantly looking over her shoulder. Their peaceful life, once filled with security and promise, had been transformed into a living nightmare. Mark was now fighting not just for a matter of principle, not just to expose the truth, but for his very survival, for the safety and well-being of his family. He was up against a faceless, ruthless giant, a corporation that seemed to operate beyond the reach of the law, with resources that dwarfed his own. The odds were overwhelmingly stacked against him, a modern-day David facing a corporate Goliath. But despite the immense pressure, despite the fear and the isolation, Mark refused to back down. He would not be silenced. He knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but he steeled himself, meticulously preparing for the next battle in what had become a desperate fight for justice. With internal channels exhausted, Mark turned to the authorities. He filed a whistleblower complaint with the SEC, crossing the line from insider to adversary. Omnicorp retaliated with a lawsuit, accusing him of theft and breach of contract. The courtroom became the new battleground. Omnicorp's lawyers buried Mark's team in paperwork, trying to exhaust his resources. They painted him as a liar and a thief, twisting his words at every turn. Mark, a man of data, was thrust into a world of legal warfare. Yet he held on to his evidence. The numbers didn't lie. His legal team, working pro bono, fought tirelessly. Slowly, the truth began to emerge in court. The battle was far from over, but hope flickered. The facts were finally being heard. Mark's resolve never wavered. The turning point came not in court, but from an investigative journalist. A cryptic tip led Sarah Jenkins to the SEC filings in Mark's case. She uncovered the story of a whistleblower silenced by a corporate giant. After months of secret interviews, Mark walked her through the evidence. Sarah's team verified every detail, building an airtight case. The story broke. The Omnicorp deception, how a billion-dollar fraud was hidden in plain sight. The article was a bombshell, supported by leaked documents and Mark's testimony. The dam of secrecy burst. The story spread worldwide. Omnicorp's stock plummeted and the public finally saw the truth. The SEC and federal prosecutors accelerated their investigations. The board scrambled to save themselves, but the narrative was lost. Mark was no longer a disgruntled employee. He was a hero. The court of public opinion had delivered its verdict. The world was watching. The fall of Omnicorp sent shockwaves through the corporate world. The scandal exposed deep vulnerabilities and failures of oversight. Lawmakers responded to public outcry, launching congressional hearings. Mark Jensen, once a defendant, became a star witness. His calm, factual testimony inspired bipartisan reform. The Corporate Transparency and Whistleblower Protection Act was passed. The law increased rewards for whistleblowers and established strong anti-retaliation provisions. It created a protected pathway for individuals to report misconduct. Companies were forced to take compliance seriously, knowing any employee could become a protected whistleblower. A new era of corporate accountability began. The balance of power shifted, if only slightly, toward the individual. Mark's courage sparked a wave of change. Transparency became a legal necessity. Years later, Mark Jensen's name became synonymous with integrity. He never returned to corporate life, instead founding a support network for whistleblowers. His actions became a global case study, inspiring new laws and protections. The Omnicorp scandal proved corporate fraud is never victimless. Mark's story became a warning to executives and a shield for the honest. His legacy is found in empowered employees and safer workplaces. He redefined loyalty not as blind obedience, but as allegiance to truth. Mark was an ordinary person who chose the harder path. His single voice started an avalanche of change. The path for truth and accountability continues to widen. The story of Mark Jensen is a testament to the power of one. It reminds us that even in complex systems, individual actions matter. Progress depends on the courage of those willing to stand against the current. Whistleblowers are essential catalysts for change. Without them, corruption festers in darkness. This is more than a corporate scandal. It's a call to action. Would we choose silence or the burden of truth? We must build a society that protects and celebrates courage. The fight against corruption is fought in the hearts of individuals. Mark's story is both a warning and an inspiration. One person, armed with conviction, can change the world.